Well, this is my first story, so bear with me when I make this. I'm going to make some mistakes here and there, but I will try my best. Note, I do not own My Hero Academia, this is just a fanfiction that I have created. Also, Izuku is going to have the powers of Natsu Dragneel in this story. Our story begins with Izuku Midoriya. He is a 5-year-old boy currently protecting another kid his age from a particular blonde-haired boy, Katsuki Bakugu. He has a quirk called Explosion and was beating the other kid who had made the blonde-hair Pomeranian mad, and that's when Izuku had stepped in. Deku, what are you going to do trying to act like a hero? You're just a quirkless loser, Katsuki said with a scowl on his face. No, Kaken, I'm not quirkless. The doctor had told me that my quirk was going to activate soon. Katsuki scoffed. Even if you get a quirk, my quirk will still be better than yours. Well then, Deku, try to protect that extra behind you, as he popped small explosions in his hand. The other two behind Katsuki had activated their quirk's wings, and the other had a quirk that made his fingers longer. They all rushed Izuku and started beating him. See that, Deku, you can't protect anything, as he said that. Izuku had smoke coming out of his mouth and a small little flame came out after that, as he felt an emotion that he hadn't felt. It was anger. He was angry that Katsuki was bullying another kid for no apparent reason. The other boy who was getting bullied before had ran away from the fight. Kaken, I'm going to stop you, as he said. The small flames erupted from his mouth. That's when Katsuki had a grin on his face. So Deku here finally awakened his quirk. I guess he isn't a quirkless loser. As he said this, Izuku was happy that his quirk had finally awakened. When he had went to the doctors last year, they had told him that he has the one joint in his pinky toe, so he just has to wait for his quirk to manifest. So now that his quirk had manifested, he was ecstatic and frantically jumping up and down saying he has a quirk. His mom had finally came to the park where they were playing at to pick him up and to go home. As Izuku runs over to his mother, he stopped for a bit and turned over to Katsuki, who was staring at him with a small yet noticeable grin. Kaken told you that I had a quirk, just had to wait for it. That said boy didn't have a chance to respond due to Izuku had already left the playground. Small note in this fanfic, Inko is the hero known as Ryukyu. Also, Izuku has spiky pink hair instead of the usual curly green hair. As they're on their way home, Izuku told his mother that his quirk had finally activated. His mother, being happy for her son, tells him, Izuku dear, we will go to the quirk doctor to get it registered tomorrow, since it was currently a Saturday. Once the pair had got home, Izuku had went to bed that night thinking about his quirk. The next day had arrived and both Izuku and Inko went to a quirk doctor to get his quirk checked. So Miss Inko, your son has some sort of a pyrokinesis quirk, but something is not making sense. What is your quirk and your husband's quirk, ma'am? My husband has a fire quirk that allows him to breathe fire, and mine is called Dragon, and it allows me to transform into one. So your son has a mutation of both of your quirk. As he says this, he has a confused expression. Inko, picking up on this, told him to continue explaining. So he did just that. So he is immune to all types of fire and can eat fire too. I haven't seen this in a fire quirk before for all the years of me being a quirk doctor. So how did he get a mutation of mine and my husband's quirk? Inko says this, cutting off the doctor with a raised eyebrow. Meanwhile, with Izuku, he had blanked everything else out. As he heard that he had a quirk, he was happy that it had finally awakened. Yes, I'm sorry about that. So when he trains his quirk, he will have a state similar to your dragon state, but he will be in his human form. He will get dragon-like scales on his face, arms, and chest. He will also have heightened senses. So does this quirk have any drawbacks? Says Inko while giving Izuku a smile. There are only 2 drawbacks to his quirk. One is that he can't eat any other element other than fire. If he tries to, it will be like poison to him. Though it won't kill him, it will make him feel severely sick, so I don't recommend for him to try. And the other weakness is motion sickness. So I recommend for him to not be in cars for too long. So young man, what do you want to call your quirk? Izuku, pondering about this for a little bit, finally says it will be called Fire Dragon. As he says this, he has a bright smile. Inko and the quirk doctor both chuckled. Okay, so young man, what do you want to be when you grow up? Upon hearing this, Izuku smiled brightly again and said, I want to be the best hero, just like All Might. Well, I have no doubt that you will be able to do just that, the doctor says with a soft smile. Fast forward 9 years later. Izuku and Katsuki's friendship had been odd. They wouldn't call each other friends, but they do tend to talk a lot, which involves a lot of yelling and choice words. Katsuki's personality had remained the same, but little more tame. And Izuku's personality had changed from a shy boy to someone who isn't afraid to fight, but he won't be actively picking fights only with those who had started it, excluding Katsuki. Half of the time when they start talking it ends up leading into a fight, with the teacher having to come over and break the two up. So we skip to the day of the sludge villain incident. Our pink-haired protagonist was walking on his way to school. That's when he saw that there was a villain fight happening against pro-hero Kamui Woods and a villain with some sort of gigantification quirk. He watches this and brings out his notebook to take notes. Quirks interest him greatly, and if he sees some in action he can't help but write some notes on said quirk. "Ah, so you're a fanboy, eh?" says a bystander with a star-shaped head. "Oh, something like that. I just really like to take notes on quirks," says Izuku as he is rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. The man nods and continues to watch the fight in front of him. As the fight was reaching its end, Kamui Woods was going to use his special move just to have another hero steal the glory. Upon seeing this, Izuku scoffed, muttering something about how that wasn't cool to steal another's spotlight. As said hero was posing for the camera and saying her hero named Mount Lady. So Izuku continued his walk to school as to not be late. Upon arriving at school, Izuku opens the door to his classroom where his eyes lock onto a certain ash blonde. They both grunt and he sighs and goes to his assigned seat, which is behind said boy. Their teacher walks in and looks at the class and tells them to quiet down and go to their seats. Once the class is seated, he says, "So since you all are third years, you should start thinking about your futures. So I will pass out handouts for your future plans now, but you all are planning to be heroes, right?" As he says this, the whole class cheers and starts using their quirks, except for Izuku and Katsuki, the both just sitting in silence. "Alright class, settle down, you're not supposed to use your quirk." As the teacher says this, he starts looking over said students to see what they are applying for. As the class settles down, he then says, "We have two of our very own trying for the hero course in UA. Katsuki Bakugu and Izuku Midoriya." The class then starts murmuring, saying that's the national school, it has a 0.5 acceptance rate. That's when Bakugo stood up and got on top of his table and says, "I passed the mock exam with a perfect score. Only me and that nerd will be the two who will go to UA from this dump. You all will be lucky to be some sidekick to some busted D-lister." Izuku, hearing the ash blonde, chuckles, "That's if they accept angry Pomeranians, Katsuki." Katsuki, hearing this, gets a noticeable tick mark on the side of his head. "Did you say something, you flame for brains?" in a mock tone. Izuku gets a tick mark as well after hearing that. "Oh, so boom boom stick over here wants a piece of me, huh?" As he says this, he is getting up and raises his right hand up and fire had came out of it. After that, the two boys rushed at each other and started a small scuffle. The teacher, having had enough, tells them both to calm down or they're going to have to report to the principal. They both go back to their seats grunting as acknowledgement. Now we skip to the end of the school day where Izuku was getting his belongings and putting it in his bag and walking out with Katsuki as he has a book in his hand. Quirk analysis number 13, it says in the front cover. Katsuki was reading about the incident in the morning and Izuku didn't really mind it, knowing that the Pomeranian wanted to see his notes on Kamui Woods and the hero known as Mount Lady. "So she just showed up and stole the spotlight, huh?" He says this with a chuckle. "Ah yeah, it was kind of a bummer, wanted to see his lacquered chain prison," says Izuku while grabbing back his book and putting it in his bag. "Well, I'll see you at the exam, boom boom stick." As he says this, he starts running from said boomstick that started cursing loudly. Izuku, wanting to go home faster, took a route he wouldn't normally take. As he is walking under the bridge, he hears rumbling beneath him and on pure instinct jumps away in the nick of time. A green liquid slime thing came out of the sewer saying, "Nice reflexes, kid, you will make a perfect skin suit for me to wear. I didn't know that freak was in town." Meanwhile, with Izuku, he was pondering on how to deal with this villain whom looks like physical attacks will do me no good, so can't rush in like some no-brain idiot. So let's try this then." As he says this, he lights his hand aflame and says, "Fire Dragon, Iron Fist," aiming for the middle of said sludge. And immediately after he does this, his hand gets stuck in the sludge and is now chastising himself for rushing in like some idiot. The sludge villain starts surrounding him and got a hold of his body and was trying to enter inside of him. Meanwhile, said boy is thinking of a plan to escape the sludge villain. That's when a light bulb lit, and then he proceeded to take a page out of Katsuki's book and said F it, and he lights his whole body in flames and screams get off of me, then said sludge scatters all around him. That's when he hears someone coming at a fast pace towards him. Izuku, thinking this is another villain, says, "Come on, can't I get a break?" That's when the figure had reached him saying, "Never fear, because I am he." Wait, what the heck happened here? He says this with a confused face. Izuku was staring in awe of his idol, the number one hero, All Might. All Might, seeing said boy, starts laughing, saying, "Ah, so I'm guessing you were the one who defeated this villain?" "Oh yes, he was going to take over my body, and I didn't want him to do that, so I used my quirk to defend myself." He says this now having a few sweat marks appear, because using your quirk in public is against the law. "Ha, it's okay, young man," says All Might, "you were just using it in self-defense, so you won't be getting in any trouble." Upon hearing this, Izuku sighed in relief, thinking he was going to be in trouble. "So All Might, sir?" As he says this, All Might had already picked up the sludge villain in a plastic bottle. Izuku stares in amazement at the number one hero's speed, because to him he seemed like a blur, but brushing that aside, he asks said number one to sign his notebook and that he had a question to ask him. After All Might signed his notebook, he says, "So young man, what was your question, but make it quick because I have more villains to take care of." Izuku says, "Right sir, I just wanted to know if it's possible to be the greatest hero just like you, one who fights with a smile on his face?" All Might ponders about it for a minute, but then speaks, "From how I saw the sludge villain defeated right when it had attacked you and you were unscathed, I say. It won't be easy, but train hard and you will do great." As he says this, he jumps away. Meanwhile, Izuku was happy that he had met All Might, though he didn't get a straight answer. He will just take the advice and train harder than ever before. Fast forward 5 minutes later. Izuku was walking down the road when he heard an explosion. Him, knowing only one person with a quirk like that, ran in that direction to see if what he was thinking was right. Upon reaching the scene, he saw the heroes fighting a villain that looked familiar, and him thinking, wait, didn't All Might scoop him up in the bottle? Did he drop him by accident when he jumped up? He shakes his head, muttering that doesn't matter right now. He then goes closer to see who was trapped inside the sludge villain. When he got closer, he heard the shouts of the crowd saying, "Why aren't you heroes doing anything? It's been 5 minutes since he's been trapped inside that thing." One of the heroes there had heard the shout and said, "We can't do anything, we don't have the right quirk to deal with this villain." Izuku scowled after hearing this. Not even going to try, huh? Then he hears the said hero saying something to the other hero next to him, "Kamui Woods. Where is Mount Lady at Kamui?" Says the hero known as Death Arms. "I think she said she was on her way, but it will take her a while due to her quirk being hard to pass through single lanes," says Kamui. Izuku heard this and muttered, "Why doesn't she just deactivate her quirk and run over here and activate it again?" Then he meets eyes with the person who was stuck in the sludge villain. He had completely forgot that the explosions reminded him of Katsuki. Then he saw said boy in the sludge villain with a fearful expression on his face. That's when Izuku had immediately rushed through the crowd and the heroes towards the sludge villain, all the while thinking, why the hell can't I stop? It's like my body is moving on its own. As Izuku is running in to face the sludge villains, the heroes rushed in to try to stop him, saying, "Kid, come back here," and another hero saying, "Does he have a death wish?" With one of the bystanders, a skeletal man, who watching the whole fight while thinking how pathetic he was. Then that's when he saw and recognized the pink hair boy that rushed in with a surprised look. Meanwhile, with Izuku, he had an idea to grab Katsuki out of the sludge villain. He yells, "Hope this works!" Fire dragon wing attack. As he said, the 2 torrents of flames came out on each hand, but he made the right one to attack the sludge villain's weak point, which he thought was his eyes, since that's the only thing that he saw was tangible, and with the other hand he made sure that the flame wasn't going to hurt Katsuki. He made it like a type of flame rope that easily went through the sludge, but latched onto Katsuki, and Izuku made sure it wasn't that hot to not burn him. In that moment, Katsuki had some breathing room because the sludge villain had removed his hold on him for a few seconds, and that's when Katsuki says, "You damn nerd, what do you think you're doing?" He says this while gasping for air. Izuku replies back to him, "Oh, shut up, you ticking time bomb, and hold on." Hold on to what? As he was saying that, he got cut off by Izuku yanking the Pomeranian out of the sludge villain. Izuku pulled a little too hard, and he didn't have time to react when said Pomeranian came right toward him, crashing into him. They both landed on the floor with a thud, all the while the same skeletal man from earlier was chastising himself, saying in his mind, "How can I call myself a hero when I'm letting these boys risk their lives?" As he says this, he then bulks up into the towering muscle figure of All Might and then rushes in to help said boys who were currently arguing with each other. The sludge villain composed himself quickly and screamed, "I'll kill you both," and strikes down with a sludge tendril that aimed for the two boys. And that's when the crowd had gasped when they all saw a figure standing in front of the said boys with a smile on his face while saying, "Never fear, because I am here." Then that said hero turns around to Izuku and said, "You did great, kid, now leave the rest to me." Then he grabs the two boys with his hand and punches at the sludge villain with his free hand, saying Detroit Smash, and aimed the punch upward. The following shockwave blasted the sludge villain away and had made rain clouds appear, and said rain put out all the fires in the surrounding area. Then after that the crowd cheers, saying he changed the weather with a single punch. Then the heroes quickly came up to help All Might secure the sludge villain, and the reporters went to All Might asking him questions. Meanwhile, with the two boys, one was getting praised by the heroes but looking over to his side with an amused face, because the other said boy was getting yelled at by the heroes saying, "We had this handled, you should have left this to the pros, kid." And that's when Izuku had a tick mark appear and he started saying, "Oh yeah, had what under control, standing there like an idiot?" As he said that, the two pros who were hounding him gasped. One of said pros spoke up, that being Death Arms, "Why you?" But that's when Izuku had cut him off saying, "Oh, be quiet, if you were gonna say you had it under control, I clearly heard you saying that you didn't have the right quirk to deal with the sludge villain, and said to wait for a hero to come with a better quirk to deal with this villain." The people who were recording All Might and Katsuki getting praised turned their cameras around to Izuku when they heard the shouting match between him and the two pro heroes. Kamui Woods, having heard enough from Izuku, spoke, "So you're saying that a kid did a better job than us pro heroes?" Izuku scoffed while saying, "That's exactly what I'm saying, you tree branch." After hearing this, Kamui Woods got mad and started yelling nonsense at Izuku, who in turn only heard like one or two words from the pros both yelling at him. He then just got up and walked away saying, "I don't get why I'm the one getting yelled at when I was the one who got my classmate over there out of that villain." The pros and the bystanders gasped, saying that he was your classmate? Izuku, having had enough, completely walked away from the scene, aiming to get home because he was probably going to get an earful from his mother when he got there. But before he reached home, Katsuki had stopped him, saying something about him not needing his help and how he had it under control. Then Izuku started to say, "Oh, so I should have left you stuck in that thing and let you die?" with a "Are you stupid" look. And that promptly made Katsuki turn around and walk away in a huff, saying he will beat him in the entrance exam. Izuku started chuckling, same old huh. Then he hears a familiar object coming towards him at fast speed and stops right in front of him, saying, "I am here." Then throws up some blood in front of Izuku, who in turn was panicking, not of seeing this form of All Might. He had smelled an area on him that reminded him of blood, but he thought nothing of it at the time. "Wait, All Might, is that you? What about the reporters that were questioning you?" Izuku says this wearily to the small Might in front of him. All Might then says, "Yes, kid, it's me, and it was quite easy getting away from the reporters, but anyways, kid, you haven't seen me in this form yet, but you don't seem that surprised by it." Izuku then says, "I did smell something was wrong because I smelled blood from you, so I thought you were injured, but at the time I didn't really think of it because I just had met All Might." All Might nods, saying, "Well, yeah, that makes sense." Then he explains how he got the scar on the side of his stomach that made him like this and showed him. After seeing that scar, Izuku got increasingly worried for All Might. "So why are you telling me this anyway?" "Ah yes, young man, before you had asked me if you can be the greatest hero just like me who has a smile on his face, right?" Izuku then nods. All Might grins, then says, "Well, before I didn't give you a straight answer because of my time limit and had to rush away so that no one saw my true form. But young man, you can be the greatest hero." As he says this, Izuku starts having a few tears come down from his face. He then wipes away said tears when All Might spoke again. "Young man, I want you to be my successor. You see, I've been searching for one for a long time now, since I can only do hero work for at most 3 hours a day, and me seeing you, a boy who had rushed in while acting more heroically than the other pros around, had inspired me to act. So young heir, what's your name?" Young man, looking sheepish at not asking this question sooner. Izuku, stammering a bit, says, "Izuku Midoriya, sir." "Ah, so young Midoriya, do you wish to inherit my awesome power one for all?" Izuku then has a confused face and says, "But you can't hand out quirks like some candy." All Might then says, "Listen here, young Midoriya, I wasn't born with this quirk of mine. It was passed down to me like a sacred torch, and now I want to pass it on to you, so what is your answer?" Izuku, without any hesitation, says, "Yes, I accept." All Might then grins without any hesitation, "How, that's what I expected from you." They both then give each other their contact information, and Small Might had told Izuku to meet him tomorrow at the Dagoba Municipal Beach at 5 a.m. because today being Friday and tomorrow being Saturday. But when Izuku had got home, he got an earful and yelled at by his mother Inko, followed by her giving him a hug and saying, "I'm glad you're alright, but if I see you on the news like that again, I won't hesitate to fly over and kick the villain's ass, then I will kick your ass right after that. Do I make myself clear?" She says this with an innocent smile that's hiding a lot of killing intent and pain, scaring the heck out of our protagonist. As that said protagonist stammers a "yes ma'am" with a salute. The next day at Dagoba Beach, Izuku wakes up at 4:30 to shower and get changed. Then he started to jog to Dagoba Beach, which was a 10-minute jog from his house to the beach. He arrives 5 minutes early and he starts stretching and looking on the beach in confusion. It was full to the brim with trash. Apparently trash would wash up on the shore of the beach, and the locals just started using this place as a dumping ground for illegal items and other items. Anyways, as he's done stretching, he sees the familiar looking figure of All Might, other known as Toshinori Yagi. He had told Izuku to call him Toshinori when he is in his Small Might form, but Izuku just chuckled at that and calls him Toshinori Sensei. "Ah, so young Midoriya, I see you're here early," says Small Might, walking over to said pink-haired boy. "Oh hey Toshinori Sensei," says Izuku while waving his hand at him. He then asks, "So why'd you tell me to go to this dump?" He says this with a raised eyebrow. Small Might replies with, "Ah yes, I've done my research on this place and it's been like this for years and your job is to clean this up." Izuku stared at him with a skeptical gaze, then says, "So you expect me to clean this all up as some sort of weight training?" "Yes, young man, the training here will be for to make sure your body becomes a proper vessel." He says this to buff up as to emphasize his point. Izuku hearing this says, "And I'm guessing that isn't the only reason why, huh?" Toshinori then grins. "You catch on quickly, young Midoriya. You see, being a hero wasn't always about the flashy stuff like fighting villains and stopping crimes. It was also as to help the community and doing stuff like this where you would gain no recognition and fame." Izuku then nods in understanding. "So how long do you think it will take me to clean this whole beach up?" All Might then buffs up and goes to the big refrigerator by the coastline of the beach and then starts putting pressure on top of the refrigerator and crushes it, causing some trash around the refrigerator to move to the side and give a view of the former beautiful beach, and says, "You will restore this beach before the entrance exam in 10 months, though I believe it will take you half that time." All Might says this with his signature smile. Izuku then smiles upon seeing the view of the beach that All Might had cleared up. And so begins the 10 months of hell for our pink hair protagonist, and in half that time Izuku had cleared up the whole beach just like All Might had said he would. Flashback to a few weeks into Izuku's training. He had gave Izuku a workout routine called My Aim to Pass American Dream Plan. Izuku stared at it as he read it and says, "Wow, even my sleep is scheduled," with a slight chuckle. All Might then says, "Yes, young Midoriya, if you follow this plan to the T, you will finish this beach in exactly 5 months, and the remaining 5 months you will be training with One for All." Flashback end. We now enter the halfway mark to the entrance exam. On the morning of that day, Small Might had came out of his van to go and see how close his successor was to finish cleaning the beach. He then hears a mighty roar in the distance and runs over to it, see that very successor screaming into the sunset. Oh my goodness," says All Might while also transforming to catch Izuku as he was falling from on top of the trash pile he had been standing on. All Might grins at his successor and told him, "You even cleaned the areas outside of the beach that I told you to. You have greatly impressed me, young man, and look at your hard work." As he says this, he shows Izuku a picture he took of him at the start of their training. Izuku being 5 feet 5 inches at the start and having a semi-muscular build. All Might then gestures to how he looks now. Izuku had grown 2 inches in the 5 months, making him 5 feet 7 inches, and he had muscles to back up his height as well. He then smiles softly at himself. "All Might, it feels like I'm cheating. I'm going to get your power after this." As he says this, he is looking down at the sand. All Might hears this and frowns. "Young Midoriya, though you already had a quirk before this one." As he is saying this, he is plucking out a piece of his hair. There is a difference from being born with a power and earning said power. Izuku stares at his mentor and idol. All Might continues, "Now young man, eat this," as he pulls the hair closer to Izuku. Meanwhile, said boy was questioning if All Might was kidding or if he was serious. All Might, sir, is this the only way to get your power?" He says this with a questioning gaze. All Might then reveals that yes, in order to get my quirk you have to ingest my DNA, and hair is the thing that isn't that gross. But don't worry, I washed my hair thoroughly before I got here, now eat. Izuku grabs the hair and mutters this is going to be gross. He then puts the hair into his mouth and with some effort swallowed after a few minutes. So cough, when will the quirk digest? He says this as he is trying not to throw up the hair he just swallowed. All Might says 3 hours, so we will do light sparring until then. He says this with an evil grin. Izuku, seeing said grin, gulps nervously and says nope and runs away from All Might. All Might grin widens even more and says, though I said this will be a spar doesn't mean I will go easy on you, young man. As he rushes forward at Midoriya, catching him off guard. Izuku then shouts, wait, didn't you say this was going to be a light spar, as he dodges a punch from All Might but gets sent back due to the shockwave. Indeed it will for me, All Might says, I want to see your current limits, and to do that I need to make you go past your limits. He then readies another punch at Midoriya. That said boy shouts, fire dragon sword horn. All Might throws his fist forward shouting Texas smash, both the attacks collide and sends Izuku back across the beach. Izuku catches himself using his flames to stop himself from flying away too far, albeit it's not working that well considering he flew across the beach, but anyways, back to the fight. Once Izuku catches himself, All Might appeared to the side of him and says always be looking out for your opponent's next move, as he punches at Midoriya, who in turn barely had time to react and got punched on the side of his face. And that in turn sent him into the ocean and about 100 feet from the shore. All Might then was thinking, oh crap, maybe I hit him too hard, he questions as he stares into the direction in the ocean he punched Izuku. He then sees said boy coming up and gasping for air and shouts, what the heck, I could have drowned All Might. Izuku then starts swimming back to shore slowly since he was very tired after that spar with All Might. Meanwhile, All Might was thinking, with that last punch I threw I put 50% of my power into it. He then grins and says okay, so how about another spar? Staring at Izuku, who had reached the shore and fell asleep due to exhaustion, All Might then says with a slight chuckle, I guess we will spar again once you wake up, young man. 2 hours later. Our pink-haired protagonist woke up and saw Small Might to his side. He then mutters, how long was I asleep for? Said Small Might replies, you've been asleep for 2 hours. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to punch you that hard, I got too excited. He says this with a frown. Izuku replies, it's fine, to be honest, you caught me completely off guard when you landed that punch, but it makes sense to why you did that. In a real fight, villains wouldn't give you time to breathe and think of a strategy. Izuku chuckled, earning a nod from All Might. Yes, young man, I wanted to prepare you for situations you may find yourself in the future. Izuku nods, that makes sense, Toshinori-sensei. He then says, oh wait, I feel something different, maybe it's one for all. All Might upon hearing this is surprised, expecting the power to show up in another hour. He then says, well young Midoriya, try to activate it and throw a punch, remember to yell smash and squeeze your buttocks with all your might. He says this in his Small Might form while imitating just that. Izuku looks on and smirks at the antics of his mentor. He then says alright, here goes nothing, as he says that he readies his punch and yells smash at the top of his lungs towards the ocean, which in turn caused a shockwave and made the water rise at high levels and going towards said boy who now has a broken right arm. He then says, oh All Might, a little help, in a panicked voice. All Might transforms into his hero form and yells Detroit smash, and the water that was coming towards them had dispersed and he now turns towards Izuku, who was holding his broken arm and trying not to scream in pain. Toshinori then goes back to his Small Might form and starts to speak. I expected as much, I'm guessing your body can't handle 100% of one for all, I say about 30% right now. Izuku stares at All Might, so I will have to learn how to limit how much power I use with one for all? Small Might nods in acknowledgement, yes, but we should get that arm checked out by recovery girl at UA. Izuku then has stars in his eyes. Wait, UA? He then starts to mutter to himself, but then quickly gets a chop from Toshinori saying stop fanboying over small details. Izuku looks back sheepish to All Might, I'm sorry sensei. All Might smiles and waves it off and says, it's fine, just follow me, I'm going to take you to UA to get your arm treated. She should be there, it's a Saturday after all. 10 minutes later, they arrive at the front gate of UA, and All Might had told Izuku to wait in front so he could get a visitor's pass for him. As Izuku is waiting for All Might, he is staring at the gates of UA with amazement. Then it ended once a blue-haired girl slammed into him at high speed. Said boy turns around about to say what the food, then they both crash onto the ground with a thud, with Izuku taking most of the impact. Izuku grunts as he looks at the girl who had crashed into him. Sue, can you get off of me? I'm not a pillow, you know. He says this to the blue-hair girl. He had made sure to not land on his right arm due to it being broken, but he caught the girl with his left arm. Said blue-haired girl gets up and quickly apologized, then two others had came up behind her chastising her, one of them saying, Nijire, you need to be careful, you barely got the hang of flying, you can't just try to fly super fast. Nijire looks at said blonde hair boy and says, I was just curious if I could control it or not. She then turns to Izuku and says, I'm sorry, my name is Nijire Hado, nice to meet you, and I'm sorry again, does it hurt a lot? I noticed your right arm, she says while pointing to his broken arm. Izuku after getting up and dusting himself off and holds his right arm, saying, my name is Izuku Midoriya, that was quite interesting, and no, I made sure not to land on it and I caught you with my left arm, so anyway, who are the two behind you? She then replies, these two are Mirio Togata and Tamaki Yamajiki. Said boys wave and say hello. Izuku says, well, nice to meet you all, as he says this All Might comes out of the gates of UA and calls him over to give him the badge. Well, I best get this arm treated, he say this while running over to All Might and entering UA. The two boys were surprised that Nijire didn't ask him a lot of questions but just shrugged, both of them thinking probably because of his broken arm. Meanwhile Nijire was thinking if she would see that pink-haired boy again, she thought that he was kind of cute. All Might and Izuku had walked through UA, mainly being empty due to school not being in session. They both walked over to Recovery Girl's office, where after 5 minutes she had finally healed Midoriya after yelling at All Might, calling him a buffoon, and smacked him on the head with her cane, and then proceeded to smack said boy with the cane too for being too reckless, and at this time, they both are thinking the same thing, she is super scary. Time skipped to 1 month before the entrance exam. Izuku was currently trying to control both his flames and One for All together and struggling to do so. He had got a better handle on One for All. He realized to not think of it as a one-time use attack, but to have it activated throughout his whole body when he is using it, like how he does it with his fire. He calls his new form One for All Full Cowling. He now has One for All at 50%, but he is trying to combine his powers. Izuku yells in anger, why can't I get this right? He says this as All Might was watching him at his side trying to help his successor. Young man says, All Might, you only had this quirk for 4 months, you made great progress, you can't expect things always to go smoothly, there will be shortcomings along the way because you are human after all. Izuku then sighs and says, yeah, you're right, I can't expect to get this so soon. All Might then buffs up and says, you should take this last month as a break to your training so you can study for the written exam. I'm not saying you should stop training for this month, but you should study more than train, he says this with a stern voice. Izuku nods and thanks All Might for all he's done for him. All Might chuckles at his successor. After Izuku head home that day, he is still thinking about how to combine both of his powers. 1 month later. Izuku woke up on the day of the entrance exam for UA. He looks over at his phone on the side of his bed where he had got 2 messages, one from All Might saying, good luck, show the world that you are here. And the other being from a certain Pomeranian saying, get ready to get second place, you flame for brains. Izuku replies back to both of them saying, thank you All Might, I will, and the other saying, oh, I won't know the feeling because I'm going for first place, so don't be surprised when I do boom boomstick. He then turns off his phone to get ready. As he walks out, his mom gives him a big hug and says, I'm proud of you Izuku, now go do your best. He returns his mother hug and says, thanks mom, I will. As he lets go of the embrace and runs out towards the train station, albeit reluctantly due to his mother having to do patrols soon. Izuku grunts as he enters the train, muttering, why does it always have to be trains? He sighs and sits down and tries not to throw up for the whole ride until UA. Once he arrives at UA, he stares at it in awe for a few seconds until he hears someone yell behind, move it, you flame for brains. Izuku turns around, then grins and says, sure Katsuki. He then steps to his left and is holding in his laughter, which he is failing at doing, when said blonde boy passed him and tripped on an uneven part of the staircase. Izuku then runs to the building with an angry Pomeranian chasing after him, saying multiple curse words as he chases said pink hair boy into the building with small explosions coming off his hand and a bloody nose. When they get inside, Katsuki stopped chasing Midoriya and went to their assigned seats, which them both hoping that they wouldn't be seated next to each other. Then the universe saw this and said, I choose violence, and said boys had a seat next to each other. Through the written test they both scored really well, only had missed 1 or 2 questions, and now said boys were arguing throughout present Mike presentation. They both stop once a tall blue hair boy in the front told present Mike how he only explained 3 robots and not the 4th due to the handout having 4 robots not 3, and had called both Izuku and Katsuki out, telling them to leave if they weren't taking this seriously, which promptly earned him a fuck you from both of the boys. And Izuku saying afterward we both weren't paying attention because we had read the handouts about the fourth robot. Maybe if you would have stayed quiet for him to finish he would have explained about the fourth robot. Also saying that no one else really had cared that me and this angry time bomb was arguing. With that it earned him a punch to the face followed by the word die by the angry time bomb. Izuku being caught off guard got mad and said oh taking cheap shots now hot. As he says this he gets ready to lunge at Katsuki who in turn was ready for the brawl with the pink-haired boy saying bring it flame for brains. Present Mike was watching this with a sweat drop and saying ahem ignoring those two so yes, they were right I was going to explain the fourth robot just ignore it it's nothing more than an obstacle and earn you no points. So all of you do your best and I'll leave you with our school motto plus ultra. Izuku and Katsuki had stopped punching each other during the middle of the speech because said boys was captured by a tall dark hair man with a scarf sighing and bringing the two to the changing room and making sure they didn't start fighting again once they were done changing and brought the two to their exam site. Izuku had City A while the ash blonde had City B. Once Izuku was at his area he started stretching and muttering something about getting an explosive blonde back after this exam for the cheap shot. Our pink-haired protagonist was wearing a black tracksuit with his red sneakers he had barely wore them and he saw them and said, why not? When he was done stretching the same blue-haired boy from earlier came up to him and told him how it was rude to curse in public with your other friend and how said boys also had embarrassed him. Izuku scoffed and said if you didn't call us out like that we wouldn't have said anything to you. They all then heard the gate open and present Mike saying what are you guys waiting for there is no countdown in a real battle go go go. The examines in the area all ran forward with Izuku smirking and rushed past all of them with a flame trail being the first one reaching the first robot which being a one-pointer it had locked onto him but before the robot could do anything he got a fire punch through its head destroying it on impact. Izuku smirks and said that's one now to get more. We now skip to 10 minutes later where a few figures was watching monitor screens in a dark room. So who do you all think will pass says the Pro Hero Midnight to show Yuta Aizawa which is also known as the Pro Hero Eraserhead. He then points to two monitor screens while everyone has potential those two have the most potential to pass. Those said screens are showing one of a pink-haired boy and the other with an ash blonde. Meanwhile All Might was watching Midoriya's screen with a grin in his mind thinking he is going to be a monster once he goes pro. So Nizu how many points do the two of them have asks present Mike towards the Chimera dog thing. Nizu chuckles saying they both are in the 100 range but the pink-haired boy is in the lead by a few points he then laugh maniacally about to press the big red button for the 0-pointer. Only for Aizawa to press it before emerging him a cry with WHYYY from the bear thing and Aizawa only chuckled at his reaction. Side note, Izuku isn't using one for all in the entrance exam due to him wanting to pass the exam with his flame quirk. Anyways back to said pink hair boy he was currently fighting robots in the center of the city being the only one that was defeating them at a fast pace in his sight. He then mutters that's 130 but that's when he hears a rumbling and sees the towering figure of the 0-pointer that was as tall as a skyscraper. Okay so why did they bring Megatron into this exam said robot swiped at a nearby building breaking the roof of it and causing rubble to fly all around its area. Izuku upon seeing this then grins and was about to rush at the 0-pointer when he hears a girl shout for help. He looks over to said girl having her leg stuck under a big piece of rubble and trying to get away from the 0-pointer that was walking towards her. Our pink-haired protagonist ran towards the girl and threw a flaming fist into the rubble making it go flying to the 0-pointer and it in turn bonked off the head of the 0-pointer making it turn its attention onto Izuku. Making Izuku chuckle saying now hold on I'll deal with you in a minute as he says that he picks up said girl who was a brunette with pink cheeks that seems like they're always there but he couldn't think about that right now. He then looked over his back where he saw the same blue-haired boy from earlier was staring at them. That's when Izuku yelled why Four Eyes catch and throws the brunette at the said Four Eyes. He had done that because the robot was about to strike at them both and he wouldn't have moved in time so he opted to just throw the girl like a football at the other boy. Which earned him a shout from both the girl and boy but it quickly turned into a gasp once they saw the 0-pointer had already made contact with said pink-haired boy. Izuku with some effort caught the big fist with both of his hands while shouting alright you tin can I'm going to turn you to ash. Flames then erupt around Izuku as he shouts Dragon Slayer secret art, hidden fireform flame lotus phoenix sword. He then pierced said tin can going right through its chest and making Izuku now realize that he was going to fall from a great height and him saying oh what the foo. But he then got cut off by having had one of the 0-pointer's arm smacking him, as when it got pierced in its chest one of its arms had flown off and it hit him. All of the examinees and teachers of UA who were watching the entrance exam were staring eyes wide from what just had happened. All Might, being the one who was proud, Might just a few seconds ago turned into worried Might as he saw his successor get smacked into a building that quickly collapsed, but then 1 minute later said pink-haired boy came out of the building he got smacked into and is visibly annoyed, having had a broken arm again. Flashback for when the robot head bitch slapped him into said building. Izuku was rocketing towards the building at a fast pace, him not wanting to go splat on the building, charged up his full cowling to 100% and punched the building to hope to break his fall. In that case it worked, but it had the building collapse on him. Flashback end. That's when all of the examines hear from present Mike. The exams are over, time is up. Everyone was surprised that he didn't die from the impact and were staring at him in awe. Izuku, not really liking the attention, then spots recovery girl at the front gate of the exam saying, "All injured, come to me and I will heal you," and walks over to her. As he came over to recovery girl, she had to held back hitting said pink-haired boy in the head for being too reckless, but just sighed and used her quirk on him. After the exams, Ryukyu comes over to pick up her son from the entrance exam with the same blue-haired girl that he saw a month ago. But that is this part of this video. Leave a like if you want another part. Also tell me in the comments how you think the story came out.